Welcome back to the Glow Up Gyrl podcast. All right, let's welcome Leah to the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, well, why don't we get started by having you tell the audience listening or watching who you are and what you do?
I would love to. So, my name is Leah Remillet, and essentially, I help time starved women find more time freedom. So, I see all of us and all the things we're trying to do. Our lives are so full, there's so much going on, and we want to be all these things, but we can't do all the things. And so, my focus and my goal is helping us find systems, automations, time management strategies, little hacks, anything that we can use so that we can get more hours back to spend them on those things that matter most. And I specifically love working with entrepreneurs, but I get to work with all kinds of people all over the world. And it just makes my heart so happy when I can help them find lost time.
Yes. Well, yes. That's why I was really excited about this conversation because I feel like this is a topic, this is an issue that so many of us deal with as far as like trying to figure out how can I do more with, with less time or just like how can I cut back things that I don't need to do. So I was just like, oh my gosh. And I loved like reading all of your information, looking at she is everybody we're going to talk about it later, but she has a podcast called Balancing Busy Podcast. So we're going to have Leah tell us about that too. But let's start out with a really good question. Does work-life balance exist? And if so, how?
Oh, I love this question. So, first of all, I want to say we have all heard all the people who say balance isn't real, work life balance doesn't exist. And I remember hearing that, especially in the first several years of owning my business and being terrified that they were right. Because it was like, if this is as good as it's going to get, like if I'm going to always feel like chaos is my mascot and frantic is the thing I run from for the rest of my life, this sounds horrible. And so, to anyone who can relate to that, I want to tell you yes, it does exist. I promise. Being a once workaholic who has overcome that and been able to find part-time hours, still making the exact same very, very full-time income, I can tell you, yes, it does. Now, I have acknowledged and recognized it's way different than I thought it was going to be. So I kept looking for that one thing, right? Like, what's the one thing that I put into my life, into my business, into my home, and that's going to solve my problems. That's going to give me time freedom. It's going to help me to stop feel like I'm constantly just crazy, right? Like feeling like I'm just feeling so frantic, chaotic, overwhelmed. And it is not one thing. So here's what I've learned. Balance is a feeling. It's not a result. It's not an outcome. So I have to look at my life and I have to look at all the different main core areas of my life and say, well, what needs to be happening for that area to feel good? What needs to be happening for my relationship as a mother to feel good? My relationship as a wife to feel good, my relationship as a boss to feel good, my relationship as an entrepreneur, as the CEO of my company to feel good in my health, right? And so we have to look at all those different areas, and it's not going to be equal. People always want to the way they try to say that balance isn't real is they try to say, well, balance is everything being equal. And I'm like, okay, come on. I think we're all a little bit more intelligent to realize that I am not going to give the equal 8 hours that I need to sleep. I'm probably not going to give that to exercise. Okay. Like, I mean, I would be amazing if I did, but no, that is never going to happen. That does not bring me any joy. So it's not going to be equal amounts of time. But if I can learn to be truly present and focused on the right things at the right time in the right places, then I put my head down on that pillow at night and I'm like, oh, this feels really good. Like life feels good. And that to me is balance.
Yes, I love that. I love that because I think there would be there's a lot of interest, right? One thing you said at the beginning is how can I find balance? Like, how can I keep that same salary? Let's just be real. People want
Right.
to, we want to keep our salaries, right? But we want to have balance in our lives. Like, you don't want to work 24/7, like, like you said. But I love the idea of like placing the time, and doing the things where you need to do it and not getting so caught up in, oh, I've got to do this like 8 hours out of the day or it didn't happen, essentially. And I think that's really important. Man, jobs, you need to go speak in more like corporate environments and let them know that. Guess what?
It's so true. And I
Yeah.
do like, I will say that was my deepest fear. So I started my company, I started my business in 2009. And my
Mhm.
husband was in graduate school at the time. And my business grew way faster than I expected, which was, I
Mhm.
mean, that's amazing, right? Like that is
Uh-huh.
the
Yeah.
dream. So I get that. I'm not trying to diminish that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to set up the systems. I didn't expect it to grow as fast as it did. I wasn't
Mhm.
even thinking about like, what am I going to do once I reach this many clients? How will I scale
Exactly.
appropriately? Right? Like, we all start our businesses, or at least the majority of us, we're like, anybody, let me help you, please. Like, who is
Yes.
willing to give me money? Right. And so when it
Right.
just starts scaling and growing, I didn't have anything in place like systems or workflows or a customer journey or learning how to use time management. And I was just trying to fit in everything I could, anywhere I could, while feeling incredibly blessed on one side because I am now our sole provider. And the fact that I
Mhm.
can be our sole provider is amazing. That I'm already making at that point 6 figures was amazing, right? Like
Mhm.
one side of me is feeling all this gratitude, while this other side of me that I kept very secret because I felt like anyone would look at me and think, oh my gosh, you're so ungrateful. But I was
Mhm.
dying inside because I
Mhm.
felt like a horrible mom, a horrible wife. I couldn't stay on top of my home for anything. Forget what's for dinner. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know. Somebody else figure that out. Even though you're babies, I don't know what to do, right? Like, I
Right.
was trying so hard to not let any ball drop. And yet, despite how hard I was trying,
They
they
were
were
dropping.
dropping
Yeah.
everywhere. And
Mhm.
my biggest fear was I am the one who pays the mortgage, who puts food on the table. Like there is no backup. It's me.
Mhm.
So if I try to pull back and the income suffers, how's the mortgage getting paid? Like who's taking care of it? It was all on my shoulders. So I
Mhm.
really understand that fear.
Mhm.
And I think that's why I resisted for so long. For so long, I just kept trying to plug all the holes instead of
Mhm.
finding a better boat because I was
Mhm.
so scared that it wasn't going to maintain. And when I was
Yeah.
finally forced to make those changes, the most miraculous and amazing thing was that not only did my income not go down, it actually went up. And I mean, exponentially, multi factors, because as I started getting those systems in place, getting a really good strategy, again, for the right things at the right places at the right time, then
Mhm.
I could take those hours that I was saving and I could invest some of them into my health, my home, my
Mhm.
kids, all those good things, which was so critical. But I could also invest some of them into the income producing activities instead of
Mhm.
just a whole lot of crazy busy work, which then
Right.
allowed me to reach those next levels. And it's just so fascinating because my deepest fear was that I would slide backwards. I never even honestly thought about how if I could manage my time better, it could actually catapult me forward. So I want to share
Yeah.
that for anybody who does have that fear. I didn't see that coming, if I'm being
Yeah.
honest. And so I want to say, like, if you're terrified, like, I can't take my foot off the pedal. Like if I do, everything's going to stall. It's all going to fall apart. And you know what? Maybe you're in a Tesla. You need to learn self-driving mode so that you can do other things and figure this out better.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for sharing that and being transparent. So, Leah, it looks like, you were sort of dealing with a little bit of overwhelm. So for anybody who might be, she's like, you think, so for anybody who might be feeling completely overwhelmed, like how can they start to feel like they can gain control again? And I know you mentioned the systems, and having those systems. So maybe if you can kind of talk through that and like, how do you start? What's the easiest way to start using systems?
Yes. Okay. So very first thing, I'm going to speak to the woman, the person who is in deep overwhelm. Okay. So everybody's at different levels. You have people who are like, yeah, a little bit, but I mean, I'm doing okay. But I'm going to speak to the woman who's like, I am barely holding on. I'm not keeping my head above water. Like, please help me. To her, I'm going to suggest very first thing, I want you to brain dump out everything, all of the different things that are going on that are in your head. Just dump them all out onto paper. Now, once you've done that brain dump, the first thing is it's just a little bit therapeutic to just, it's all in the head. It's rattling around. You're constantly like, oh yeah, and that, and that, and that. Just get it down on paper. Next, I want to encourage you to implement the Eisenhower matrix. So the Eisenhower matrix, it is literally named after Dwight D. Eisenhower, 34th president. And his productivity skills, I guess, were just fire. Like next level, this man could do more than most did in a month in a couple of days. And not just that, he could sustain it for decades. Like, you know how we all have, like, we have like that little mini season where we can power through, right? But then we go back to maybe our old ways. We get a little inconsistent. Not him. He was just incredibly consistent with how much he could do decade after decade from position after position, way before he ever becomes president and all these things. And so people wanted to study him. They wanted to understand, like, how do you do this? Well, he had this little system, and it's now called the Eisenhower matrix. And essentially he would do what I just suggested, all the different things that he had on his plate, all the different things. Then he would categorize them. And so they get categorized into 4 different quadrants. Quadrant 1 is important and urgent. Okay. So these are the things that are like, I have got to get that proposal out because I said I would get it to him by today. This is important and urgent because this is what brings the money in, right? So maybe that would fall under like an important and urgent. And we need to be picky about what these tasks are. That's going to be one of the things. If you want to really next level, you have to, over time, learn to refine your skill of truly recognizing what's actually urgent, because we get tricked. We get tricked a lot into thinking things are urgent that honestly are not. So, okay, quadrant 1, urgent and important, and let that be number 1. So that way, when you go to look at this brain dump that you've done, all the things that are like, this is urgent and important, those get a little 1 by them. The next quadrant is important, but not urgent. Okay, this is number 2. Now, here's the difference between the people who accomplish more than the rest and the people who don't, okay? The people who you just look at them and you're like, how in the heck do they do as much as they do? They have learned how to prioritize the important but not urgent, because these are the things that actually move our big goals forward. But they're also the things that are the easiest to drop off of our list. Because when you're looking at all the things I need to do for the day, the thing that's important but not urgent, it's pretty easy to be like, oh, I'm going to get to that later. And then later just doesn't arrive, right? We're all guilty. Yeah. We're all like, oh yeah, that's that thing I've been saying I was going to do and still have not, because we let the urgency, right? Like we let it take over. Okay. Number 3 is not important, but urgent. So these things, we need to be, again, choosy about really understanding what is what. These are often a really great area to outsource, right? Like, so for example, both you and I have podcasts, right? And with the Balancing Busy podcast, There are things that are urgent. The show notes need to be created. The guests need to be reached out to. Like, these are urgent things, but is it the best thing for me, myself, to be doing? Or could my time be better invested in that important but not urgent, right? In that number 2 category. So that's something that I outsource. So we can look at things and start looking at, is this something I could delegate? I could better automate. I could better systemize, or just straight up outsource. If we make a shift and we say, well, let's talk about home. Where would this fit in home possibly? Well, some things that are urgent but not important is like, we need to have dinner. We're supposed to eat. Like, it's kind of a normal thing. People eat, and it's around 5:30 p.m. It starts to feel urgent, right?
Right.
And yet, and I do see it as important that we have family time together. But is it so critical that I'm the one cooking it? Maybe not so much. And so I've built and stacked about 6 systems where we are having homemade dinners most of the time, but I'm not the one cooking them. So that would be another example of kind of recognizing and looking at, is this something that I personally need to be doing? This is my zone of genius where it needs to be me. Or is there another way to do this where it gets done, but not as heavily with me? And then the last category is not important, not urgent. Okay, these are the things that we really need to decide. Does this even need to be on the list? So going back to that overwhelmed woman who's listening to this right now, I am going to highly encourage her to say, permission granted. No, I do not have to do it. Those are off. They're done, right? Like, they're getting kicked off the list completely. When we categorize this list and we look and we say, okay, these are the ones, these are the 2s, these are the 3s, and these are the 4s, then those 2 items we're going to schedule in later for when a little bit of time opens up. Those 1 items, we're going to make sure those are at the top of our list because they are urgent and important. Those not important, urgent, those get to be pushed aside. Like, that is just not going to be a priority right now. And we get to really ask ourselves, like, why am I telling this story that says I have to do it all right now in this moment? Is that true? And then start to untangle that and figure that all out. One of the things that I found that masks as urgent but isn't necessarily important is the pings, the notifications. You're in the middle of doing something actually productive, actually on your list of like, this is important. And then the ping or the notification pops up, and there is just this like deep need to go see who it is, what it is, right?
Yes.
And so that is a very prime example of, it feels urgent. It seems urgent. Everything in our bodies starts tingling, like, I have to know what's happening. And yet it distracts us from our 1s and our 2s all the time. So just really looking at, okay, how am I going to correct that? And really, the way that most of my systems were developed is, I saw something that was blocking my progress. For example, the ping that stopped me once again from doing the important work I had been doing. And I was like, okay, how am I going to protect myself from this? So I started turning off all notifications, having focus mode or airplane mode, or the inbox closed out. It's not even open, like not allowing those to come in. And then I said, okay, what else can I do? Well, I do need to check email. That is important. So I started blocking into my schedule 2 times a day for 30 minutes each when I check email. So I know, like, I am going to check them. I'm not going to ignore them, but I'm not going to let it be at the cost at my goals and my priorities. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think those are some excellent tips, and that's a great process that I think everybody could use, whether you're a business owner or just a professional, whatever. I think that could be so helpful. And I like that you start to introduce the idea of like, what don't I have to touch? I love that, because I do think that a lot of times people feel like, like dinner, using the dinner one, like, oh, if I'm not cooking dinner, then no, you just need dinner. Like, you just need the food. But it doesn't have to be at your hands. Maybe given your schedule, you cook dinner on the weekends when you have more free time. And then during the week, you're figuring out other things. Let's talk about the outsourcing a little bit more because I do know, yes, as a person who hosts a podcast, like often find myself in that scenario where it's like the admin tasks are the things that'll take you out. It's all the yes, it's all those little things that are so important, but it's like, do they have to come from Kyra? Or could they come from someone else? So, what are your thoughts, and how could someone get started with that process of outsourcing for their business?
This is such a good question. And it's a hard one because it feels intimidating to find the person, to train the person, to know how much to pay the person. I mean, there's just a lot of things that can really stop us before we ever even start because it feels intimidating. And I completely get that. But absolutely, I love what you said. Like it is those tasks that they can stop your business if you allow yourself to be doing all the things. And we tell stories like, but nobody's going to do it as well as I can. Maybe, maybe not. Or nobody's going to care as much as I do. Okay, that's probably true. But guess what? They can care enough to get the job done for you. And that's the important part. So one of the things that can be really, really helpful, maybe you know right away. Maybe you're like, okay, it would be so amazing if somebody else could do X for me. But maybe you're not sure what that thing is. Maybe you're not entirely sure. So tracking your time, I absolutely understand that it is not a fun thing to do. Okay. I am not trying to act like that is enjoyable, but tracking your time for a week, 1 week, and really seeing where your time goes can be so powerful in recognizing I had no idea I was spending that much time on that thing. And when you do recognize and see that, it's powerful because then you say, oh, okay, I definitely want somebody to help with that. My first attempts at outsourcing, they were hard. I was intimidated. I was very nervous. But just like anything else, you practice, you get better. Don't think you're gonna hit it out of the park every single time. You're gonna make some wrong choices where you hire the wrong person. One of the biggest things, I'm just gonna call it out for what it is. When everybody wants to hire, when they realize they need help, they're intimidated by the process. So they go try to find a friend or family member. Because let's just be honest, it feels way easier to ask your best friend or your sister or your mom if you'll help. Sometimes that works. Most of the time it doesn't. Okay. It just doesn't. And now you strain that relationship. You now get to, have things get all kinds of awkward. So I'm going to encourage people, unless you are like, no, I legitimately for sure know that they are going to be perfect for this and that we can work together very, very well. Don't go that route. There are so many opportunities out there like Fiverr and Upwork, and honestly, just posting on your Facebook wall that you're looking for somebody that can do these skills. And if you know someone, will you share this post, right? Like there are easier ways to do this that make it really possible. And I actually have an podcast episode that is all about outsourcing. And it's literally used to be a paid course, and we turned it into a blog episode. So on Balancing Busy, they can go and search outsourcing and find it. I'll try to find the actual episode number, which would make that a heck of a lot easier for them. And then you had also, a moment back, you had asked, it's, okay, episode 29. So 28 and 29, it's a 2-part, and it's literally my entire method. Here's how I train when you don't have time to train. Okay. Mm-hmm. I have a very simple system because I was like, how am I ever going to train them? I don't even have time to do the work myself, let alone teach you how to do it. Right. So I have my system for that. I have how I go about figuring out how much to pay them and actually getting them to tell me. I have a really simple system. Instead of getting people's resumes, oh my gosh, getting people's resumes is the worst. It just is, because you're like, this isn't even really applicable to the thing that I need most of the time. So I have a different way that I do that. That's so much easier. So yeah, Balancing Busy podcast, episode 28 and 29 can show that. And then if anyone's like me, I'm very visual. Like if you can show it to me, then I'm like, oh, now I got it. Okay, my wheels are spinning. And so if anybody wants to see a sneak peek into the behind the scenes of my systems, I am so happy to share that with your listeners. And they can just go to gift.balancingbusy.com and they can actually get a sneak peek behind, and I'll share those with them.
Nice. Awesome. Love that. And I definitely I love everything that you said. I like that we've got some episodes to reference. You gave us some good insight to start, but I'd love thank you so much for sharing the episodes. But because also guilty, have said that same thing about, well, I mean, they're not gonna do it as good as I do it. Like I mean,
Right?
because it's my baby. I mean, I'm the one who loves this business so much. But I do think that's really important because I think you can't grow until you're able to let go and to begin, delegating to other people. And like you said,
So right.
it's never going to be like at your standards because I think especially women, as business owners, like we always have like, I don't know, like mine is always like up here to the top through the roof. But then as long as I can find somebody that, maybe it's not through the roof, but it's like, oh, that is good. Okay. And like if I didn't know my method, that'd be fantastic. But it's just
Yeah.
finding that balance of like someone, and I think you will meet people and you will find people that care about what you're doing just as much as you care about it. You just have to be open to it and have an open mind because
Mm,
it is just very easy to like get analysis paralysis because you're the one blocking and you're the one
yes.
like paralyzing yourself because you're afraid to, like you said, you're fearful of like, oh, I don't have time to train somebody, I don't have time to do these things. So make sure you check out those episodes that Leah referenced and get that stuff outsourced so that you can get more time in your day to work on the things that will help to drive and grow your business.
Yes. I love that you said, talking about those fears, like check in with your fears, figure out where they're actually coming from. And if the story is true, right? Is the fear, nobody's going to do it as good as me? And then check with that. Like maybe, but maybe not. Some things are easy to outsource. Okay. So outsourcing, the podcast editing, that was super easy because I don't think I can do it well. I have no idea how to do that. Right. So I'm like, there was no part of me that was like, oh, they're not going to do it as good as me. Oh, no one should have me try to edit an episode. So that one was easy. But we've all had the thing in our business that's like, maybe it's the customer interaction. You know
Mm-hmm.
how much you care. You know how much
Mm-hmm.
you like jump in and want to take care of them and want to go above and beyond. And so you're worried, well, what if somebody else doesn't do it that way? That comes down to a training. That comes down to
Mm-hmm.
creating scripts and giving them enough ownership that they know they can and have permission to go above and beyond. I believe it's Zappos, where in their training for their customer service, everyone is allowed to give up to $50 credit without ever getting a sign off from anyone. They don't have to have a manager's approval. You are at your own discrepancy. If you think that will help, up to $50, no problem. And then above that, then they might need to get manager's approval. And I just love that. I love that idea of when we are getting those people to help us, let's give them enough understanding of our core values and then ownership over what they can do so that they can go above and beyond. And then there's simple things like, and make sure you BCC me on everything for the first while so that I can make sure
Mm-hmm.
it sounds the way I want it to sound, or whatever that might look like. And we can also look at getting creative with where we outsource. Time, we're trying to get time back wherever we can, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we might be thinking, oh, my business is the first thing where I'm going to go. But maybe it's your house. Like maybe you go get a
Mm-hmm.
house cleaner and guess what? They
Mm-hmm.
can clean your house pretty darn great, right? And that gives you multi hours a week back. And then you say, I am going to very intentionally invest that time into income producing work so that not only can I justify the house cleaner, but I can also ramp up my business and make some
Mm-hmm.
more money, right? So we can also look to just get really creative with which areas we're going to outsource. And
Mm-hmm.
so it can be in our home, it can be in our business, it can be the things that we absolutely don't know how to do, like me and my editing, or it can be the things that honestly we do know how to do. I know when I went to outsource my sales. I love sales, and I feel like I'm pretty good at sales. Mm-hmm. And so that was a hard one for me, right? I'll say that was one where I'm like, oh, but they're not going to be able to do it as well as I can. And if I'm being totally honest, that was true. Okay. I am the best salesman of my own business. Okay. I just am. But they were pretty darn close. And the hours, I mean, that was one of the biggest places early on that I got massive time back. Those hours were so powerful because I got to spend them with my family, because that first business, the sales typically happened at night when both husband and wife were home. They could talk together. And so it was like, I was having to leave my family. I wasn't there for dinner. I wasn't there for all these things. And one thing that I learned, and you don't know this until you actually outsource, is, she had a secret little piece of magic that I couldn't have, because when I'm talking to them, I'm talking about my own product, right? Like, right. I sound pretty braggy if I'm like, oh my gosh, did I not do amazing or what? Right. But she could come in and say, oh my gosh, this is incredible. You have to have them all. This is so amazing. And it was an outside perspective. So I didn't even think about how powerful that was until it was actually happening. So yeah, check in with your stories. Where are these fears coming from? Is it true? Is there another option? Could you do a test run? Can you do a trial period? We don't have to go into everything 100% all in. We can say, you know what, I can't hire a full-time employee, but I could hire someone for 5 hours a week, and I could test it for a month, and I could see how that goes. And I can even tell them, I'd like to give you more hours, but I'm going to need you to help me make more money so that I can justify paying you more hours, right? Like, let them have ownership in this and skin in the game. And then you're truly feeling like you have a teammate versus a assistant. And that is different, right? There's a different feeling between those two things.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right. So I know I could talk to you all day. I feel like I could talk to you all day, but for the sake of time, I'm going to ask you one last question before we transition into some additional questions. But how can business owners, professionals, how can we as women avoid burnout?
One of the things that helped me is realizing I can be it all, but I should not do it all. And what I mean by that is, I want to be an incredible mom. I want to be a great wife where my husband is like, she is amazing. I want to be a great business owner, and I want to make an impact. I also want to be a great sister and a great friend. I love volunteering. Like, there's a lot of things I want to be, but I can't do everything. And I shouldn't do everything. Maybe that's the bigger secret, is I shouldn't do everything. So I think one of the first things is we need to realize and recognize what's most important to us. And we need to let that be our priority. And we have to remind ourselves of it all the time, because we live in a world that is constantly saying more is better. More, fit more in. And we have to undo that narrative and say, actually, less is better. I want white space in my life. I want freedom to be able to do an impromptu lunch date or trip, or my kids need me and I can stop everything and I can be there. Less is the goal, ladies. It is not more. The more we keep believing that we're supposed to stuff in more, the more we're hurting, right? The more we are feeling like we're not enough, even though how could we cram anything else in? And so recognizing that the goal is actually less, reminding ourselves of that daily, and then looking to choose the better part. There is this wonder, I've been living off of it for years, that I heard, that is good, better, best. For most of us, let's be honest, our life isn't filled with anything bad, right? Okay, maybe a trashy, show that we watch. But for the most part, we are doing all good things. And so what we have to do is we have to start learning how to look for the better things and then the best things, and be confident enough to prioritize those best things over the good and better.
Nice. Love that. Awesome. Leah's dropping nuggets. All right. So, can you tell the audience how they can connect to you and about any programs you offer, how someone could work with you or connect with you?
Absolutely. So, two places to connect with me. Number one, we already know you have incredible taste in podcasts. So, I would love for you to come over and follow Balancing Busy podcast and come take a listen there. That's going to be an amazing place to learn from me. But also, whenever I do have new things happening, I share them over there as well. I'm also on Instagram, but that's under my name, Leah Remillet, which I know is a doozy to spell. She'll have it in the show notes. If you
Yes.
happen to be able to text right now, LeahRemillet. You can just text yourself and then go find it later. So you can find me on Instagram there, and then balancingbusy.com. We have all kinds of resources, opportunities to work with me. I have a membership program that shows every single system that I have in my business. And not only could you use it, but when you do hire people, you can be like, watch that training, implement it into my business. Okay. Like, let's outsource at the best level. And
Yes.
so I have that membership. Sometimes I do master classes and different things like that. But my biggest goal is helping us as women have happy families. I love entrepreneurship. Business is in my like DNA. I love it. But more than anything, I believe in happy families. And I believe that if we want to change our own families and then our communities and then our nations and then our world, it starts with our families. And then when we can show up more present and more powerful, it's everything.
Yes, awesome. All right, so we're going to quickly slide into three things with Leah. I'm going to ask you three questions, helps the audience get to know you a little bit better. My first question is, how do you start and end the day?
I start the day with prayer. There you go. I
There
start
you go,
and end
girl.
with prayer.
Yeah,
I have a little, routine for each one, but they both start with prayer.
nice. Number two, what's a goal or intention that you've set for yourself this year?
To see the miracles. So I made my word for the year miraculous. Last year was
Nice.
a doozy. We had a house fire at the very beginning of the year. And it was a big, hard year. My oldest graduated, went off to college, and now is serving a mission. So it was like my mom heart was like, ugh, it was so hard. And we didn't even live in our own house because we'd had this fire. And it was just, if 2023 was the year of hard, when I got into January, I was like, we're done. I don't want that anymore. So I decided my word for the year is miraculous. And right now, my intention is to see the goodness, like just to see all of those like tender mercies, those amazing things that are happening and not miss them because I'm too caught up in the things that aren't going as well as I'd like.
Oh, I love that. And then the last question I'm going to ask you, which is to leave our audience with three things you'd like for them to take away from our conversation today.
You will never regret putting your family first. Your dreams and goals that are on your heart are not an accident, they are on purpose. So embrace them and see what's possible. And you're never going to know what you're capable of if you don't try. We all have had moments where we are out of our minds, terrified, and think, there's no way I can do this. No way, no way. And then I'm going to go ahead and say, miraculous thing happens where at some point you look back and you go, oh my gosh, that's not hard anymore. And it's not that it got easier, it's that you got better. So we got to do the big, scary things if we're going to find out what we're capable of.
Oh, I love that. That gave me all kinds of chills. So thank you so much for sharing with this audience today in this community. Like I said, your tips have been like phenomenal, and I think
Oh,
it's
I'm
going to
so
be
glad.
so helpful to our listeners. So Leah, you can always come back and share with this
Yay, I'd love
community in
to.
the future. All right, well, stay tuned, everyone. I'll be right back.